Hello. All right, let's do the mic testing first. Can everyone hear me? And is anyone there? Cool, we have some upvotes. Hello everyone. Cool, nice. Yeah, so we're just gonna spend like 5 more minutes before we start talking about Vine.js. Hello, Mike. Cool. Thank you. Thank you for letting me know. Cool. I think we can start talking about Vine. So first things first, if you want, you can go to vinejs.dev and you can access the documentation. It's public, so you can access it. If you want to look into the code, just click on this GitHub icon and it will take you to the GitHub repo. So yeah, let's talk about like what is Vine.js, why we built it, and all that stuff. So Vine.js is simply a data validation library that you can use within your backend applications written in Node. And one of the like most common use case for using Vine is to validate the HTTP request body that you get in your applications. So there are other libraries, and like a very popular one is Zod that you can already use. So like, why build Vine when Zod already exists? So there are like a few reasons behind that. First, Vine.js code base is not new. We have extracted it from the AdonisJS validation module. So we had the validator inbuilt inside AdonisJS since 2015. And we I would say refactored it so many times, and this time we decided to like basically move it out of AdonisJS and make it a standalone library. Second, Vine.js is a lot faster than Zod. So we have like these benchmarks on GitHub. Here are all the links. If you want, you can like go ahead and look at the benchmarks code and run them on your machine. So if we like validate a very simple object with Zod, Zod will like basically run 1.19 million operations on my computer, and Vine.js will run like 9.45 million, which is like almost 9 times faster than Zod. Will it replace the Adonis v6 validator? Yes, it will. But we will still have the existing validator in the code base, so that you don't have to like migrate your applications right away to Vine. You can still use the existing AdonisJS validator if you want, and then you can like slowly start moving to Vine. But if you're creating a new application, then Vine will be like the recommended way to go. So coming back to why Vine and not Zod, like why not use Zod and create Vine? It's the performance aspect is one thing. Another thing with Zod is basically built, at least like what I can assume, to validate any JavaScript data type in your applications. Whereas Vine is built to validate the form data or the JSON payload that you request over the HTTP request. And there is like a small difference between validating serialization validating form data and validating JavaScript objects. And that difference is, if you go to this doc here, HTML forms and surprises, and we scroll a little bit, that is, when you have a form and you serialize it to form data, or let's say you serialize it to an object, every single data type is a string. So HTML forms have no concept of data types which are specific to any language. So if you have an input type number, and once you serialize it, what you will get is a string and not a number. So at some point of time in your applications, you will have to convert these strings to numbers, or convert these strings to booleans. And Zod does not do this automatically for you, whereas Vine does that. And also the AdonisJS validator used to do this. So this is one major difference between Zod and Vine. So yeah, again, apart from these two, everything else can be subjective. For example, Vine.js has way more validation rules than Zod. We will be adding even more, specific to databases. For example, for AdonisJS, we will have validation rules that can check that the value is unique inside database. We might create integration with other ORMs as well. So we are going to do that. Extending Vine is really simple. So you can create custom rules. You can create custom schema types, which is again one of the things which was missing in Zod. It was not that straightforward to add a custom type in Zod. Again, we start using Vine.js with Adonis v5. Yes, you can. Vine.js can be used with any Node application, so you can also use it with Adonis. You might not find all the rules. As I was saying, AdonisJS has a unique validation rule which checks inside the database. We don't have that in Vine. I will be creating a plugin for AdonisJS which will have it. But yeah, you can basically start using it. So these are some of the fundamental differences from Zod. If you're using Zod, you like it, you don't see any reasons to switch, you can do that. You don't have to use Vine, but if you like it, then yeah, do give it a try. So here, we have some really basic examples. We will go through them later in this stream. What else can we talk about? And a biggest one, can you use Vine.js in your front-end applications? No, you cannot use it. I don't spend a lot of time in the front-end ecosystem, so I don't try to build a lot of tooling for that. Vine.js is strictly for the Node.js runtime. So if you try to use it in your front-end applications, it might not work, and I might not be able to even refactor things to make it work inside React or Vue or any other framework. Cool. So can we validate files? Not right now, but files are very specific to how do you represent a file? Is it a stream? Is it a stream created out of the multipart body, or is it a file object which exists in form data? So there has to be different integrations to validate files at different levels. Right now we don't have any rules for that, or I would say any schema types for that, but I will be adding them. Also, Vine is not 100% done. It's pretty much there. There are still some things pending, which I will be creating to in the future. We have another question. Yep, you have that in Zod, but the problem is first you have to type it on every number field. It's not automatic. So you have to like remember, okay, this thing can be a string, so I have to convert it to a number. And coercion is not that simple when it comes to booleans. So you can like wrap a string inside a number object and it will get converted to a number. But when it comes to booleans, it's not that simple. Like, let me give you an example. So if you go to console and we say boolean, and here we say false, like this is the string that we have received in the HTTP request. It returns us true, not false. So you have to be, like specific that if string is false, then it should be false, or if string is true, then it should be true. You can't like do simple coercion here. And again, you have to do it like on field by field basis, whereas VineJS automatically does it for you. And it's not that Zod cannot add it. Maybe they will add it as well. But at least as of today, they want exact JavaScript data types to validate, whereas Vine is more aware of the serialization behavior of HTML forms. Cool. So what I was thinking to do is, like give VineJS a test inside an AdonisJS application. And I'm going to use what will be AdonisJS 6. So out here, I have a new project, which is structured as for the unreleased version of AdonisJS 6. And it's like a vanilla AdonisJS project. So we don't have anything inside it right now. And I will install Vine here, and we will like start playing with some examples and see how it goes. So what I'm going to do is go to documentation, copy this, paste it here. All right, once it's installed, we can run Node.js serve watch, which will start the development server. Let me copy this URL, paste it here. Here we get it works. Basically, this route is rendering it works string. So let's copy this example and paste it here. Let's move all this code inside our route handler. So post, sign up. This will be async. And let's format it. And maybe we can return the output. And let's remove this data object and instead use the request body. So we will say, let's pull in request here, request.all. So what we are basically doing is we have defined a schema here, which accepts a username, email, and a password. Password should be confirmed, and then we validate it, and then we return the output. So let me open Insomnia so that we can make an API request to this endpoint. And we go to sign up. I have like created these couple of dummy requests that I know that I will be testing right now. So if I make a request, it says cannot connect to server. All right, so right now we get this like really ugly validation failure. It's because this method throws an exception, and AdonisJS doesn't know how to convert this exception to a response. So we have to do that. Now, there are a couple of ways to do it. First, we can wrap this validate call inside a try catch, take the errors and return that, like convert that to a response. Or we can use the global exception handler, which runs every time any route handler throws an exception. So I will do that. I will go to this global exception handler, and out here, I will say if error is an instance of the validation error. Now this validation error comes from this VineJS import. So VineJS has this called errors, which has this validation error that you can use to see if an error is an instance of this particular class. Then we will say return cdx response status error dot status send error dot messages. Now, if we go back, refresh, now here we get the validation errors. So it's like really simple, an array of objects with a message, which rule failed and like on which particular field. And now we can send some data. Let's say my name, my email address, and this password 123, secret 123. Now we get the output, which is like the validated output. Also, if we hover over this variable, we like get the types for it. So it's like basically type safe, which AdonisJS validator was as well. So that's like a very simple way to use Vine. Now, what we recommend is, if we scroll to the bottom, is pre-compiling your schemas. So right now, every time a new HTTP request comes in, we are defining a Vine schema, and then we are using that schema to run the validation, which basically means on every HTTP request, Vine.js has to like parse this schema, compile it, and then run the validations. And if you want like all the speed improvements that we were talking about, you have to pre-compile this schema. And for that, you basically have to move it out of this request. Let's say we keep it here, and we have to like call vine.compile on it. So let's copy this. And now instead of using vine.validate, we will say validator.validate. And just give it the request data. All right, let's give one more run. Let's remove this, try it, everything works. And now the schema is like pre-compiled, and we are not compiling it on every HTTP request. If you're using like Vine and any regular Node.js application, you can keep your schemas anywhere you like. For AdonisJS, I'm thinking to keep them inside app validators, and then maybe we can like have a file for each resource. In this case, it's a user, and maybe we can add a suffix user validator like this, and let's move it to that file. I'll say vine.compile and put it here so that we don't like have to define two variables. And from here we will say export constant sign up validator. Let's import Vine. Wow. What happened? Let me paste it here. Cool. Okay, so let's format it. So what we're doing is now we are like creating these validators inside a specific file. In this case, it's user validator. You can like keep as many as you want. So right now, like we are signing up a user. So we created a validator for the sign up. If you are like updating a user, you can have a validator for that. You're changing their password, you're changing their email. You can like have multiple validators within a single file. And then inside your routes, or maybe like inside your controllers, you can import it. So in this case, it's going to be sign up validator, and we can use it. And it should still work. Yep. Cool. Yeah. So that's like how it works by default. We have a question. Default message is confusing. I'm not sure I get a default message is confusing as schema is set to required, but it returns must be defined. So it says the username field must be defined. So I think like what you're saying is like the field is defined, but the value is not there. So the error message should be like more specific to that. Maybe it can be like you can define custom messages for that, but I thought like this particular one works fine for both the use cases. But anyways, like if it's confusing for everyone, we can fix it. Can we use it as a middleware? You can, but then I think you will like lose the type safety, because right now once you call it inside a route, you can like hover over the variable, or like you can basically use the output, and you have like all the type safety. So you can see it as email, password, and username fields, and username is a string. Once you hide it inside a middleware, you like lose that type safety. Can I set custom error messages? Yes, you can. We will like go through that as well. So let's do that. Now, how you can do that is by like defining, like basically assigning a messages provider to Vine, and then defining like all the custom error messages out here. And we can like talk a bit about messages provider, what they are. So this particular class, simple messages provider, it takes like a collection of error messages as an object, and where, you know, like key is the validation rule, or it can be, you know, like a field plus validation rule. So you can have per field specific error messages. If you want, you can like also create custom messages provider. So let's say if you have a website which is in multiple languages and you want to translate your error messages, you can create a custom messages provider that integrates with your translations workflow that you have like for the rest of your app, and you resolve the error messages from there. Now, we won't like get too much into how to create a custom messages provider, but we can try to define custom messages. So for now, let's create a file. Node.js make preload file, Vine, and let's import Vine from VineJS, and also import this. Cool. So this is how like you can basically define customer messages. Here we are like assigning a messages provider to Vine, and here we are like defining all the validation errors. The validation errors that you're defining here, they are applicable globally, which means they will be like used with all the schemas and all the validations. If you want per schema validation error messages, then you can also assign a messages provider to your validators. For example, you can say, and you can like assign the messages provider to the sign up validator and have sign up specific error messages over here. And finally, if you want to define the error messages at the time of like validating some data, you can also do that. So out here, you can define a messages provider. So you basically have like 3 layers. Either you can define it globally, or you can define it per schema, or you can define it at the time of validating the data. Cool, we have few questions. So can I validate a form data object instead of you will have to convert it to a regular object. Like you cannot give form data instance directly to Vine and like have it take care of it. You have to convert it to an object. At least like AdonisJS does it. I know Fastify also does that. Like Fastify converts your form data request to a simple object. So you have to do that. There is like no way to make Vine.js validate form data instances directly. Another question is Vine.js handle validation with async rules? Yep, you can do that. The validation rules can be async. How they get compiled is a little bit complex. Maybe you have to like dig into the code base. But if you go to this repo, the compiler repo, like you can go through the entire code and see how we take care of compiling the schema, how we like create refs out of rich data types. So you have to like basically dig into the code a little bit for that. Do you have any helpers to convert a schema to a TypeScript type? Like, yep, you can do that. So if we come here and we say type sign up type, we can say infer, and we can give it the validator, or like you can give it the schema, both will work. And here like you can have types. It says username is string, email string, password string. So there is like an infer helper which can infer the types from your validators or from your schemas. Another question. So the speed difference between Zod and Vine is coming from the compile method. Yep. So unfortunately, like Zod has no concept of compiling schemas. That's why like they have to reparse the schema every single time. I think that's the reason they are not like as quick as Vine, whereas we compile the schema into an optimized JavaScript function. So that's like one of the reasons. All right, sometimes rules exist in Laravel, like if a field exists in the payload, then it will validate. Yep, but I think we are doing it a little bit better. I will show it to you how we are doing it in Vine. And we call them unions. So we will like dig into the unions in a bit. Cool, I think we don't have any more questions. So maybe we can move to next example. So that was, let's go to examples, arrays and objects. Yeah. So yeah, here like I wanted to show you something really simple, and that was how you can, like basically convert your validated output to camel case. So in this particular form, we have a field in stock, which is in snake case. And what we want to do is once we have like done all the validation, we want to convert it to camel case so that inside our JavaScript code, we are not, like dealing with snake case values, because usually we all like follow this convention of camel case variables and everything in JavaScript. So I'm going to create another validator, this time app validators product validator.ts. Let's copy some of the bits. Here we will say create product validator. Let's get rid of everything. And we have name, that should be a string. We have price, that should be a number. And it should always be positive. We have description, that should be a string too. Sizes is going to be an array where everything is like a number or maybe like a string. So here we are saying like sizes should be an array of strings. And finally, in stock should be a Boolean. And finally, what I'm going to do here, I will say to camel case. Now, if we go ahead and define another route for adding a product, here we will say create product validator. And if I hover over this output, you can see the in stock value is in camel case out here. So in our form, it's still in snake case, but once we are like done with the validation, we are converting it to camel case by using this to camel case modifier, so that like you don't have to go ahead and manually reassign it to a variable. We have another question. Is the compilation similar to what AGV does with JSON schema? Yep, it's pretty much similar to that. But like they take the JSON schema, we take code-driven schema written in TypeScript or JavaScript. All right, so let's give this a try. Cannot post to products. Why? Oh, there should be products. And here we have our validation errors. Let's say the product should be food. The price is $19.99. Description is going to be my awesome product. Size will be XXL, XL, and L. Is it in stock? Let's say we say false. And here we like get the validated output. Now there are like two things to notice. First, the price gets converted to a number data type, as you can see over here, and the in stock gets converted to camel case, and it's also a Boolean data type, and you don't have to do like any conversion. And if you want, we can say validated and original, just to see that when we get the data in request, this thing is a string, this thing is also a string. So Vine like internally does all these conversions for you so that you don't have to do it manually. Thank you. And now we will like look into unions, like what exactly unions are and when you should be using them. So let's look at a bit more complex example, like this particular one. So let's say we have a form in which we want to validate different data type, or like let's say different fields depending on some other field. For example, here we are saying if the user selects the fiscal host as Stripe, then we want to validate the account ID and it should be a string. If they select PayPal, then we want it to be, then we like actually want email and it should be a string. If they select Open Collective, then we want a project URL and it should be a string. And we want it to be like type safe, so that once we do the validation, and if you put a if conditional on the type, the next property should like automatically appear for us, and we don't have to do conditionals on that as well. So and for this you can use unions. So the example we are going to look at is a little bit different one. So yeah, so this is like the example we are going to look at. Here what we are saying is, let's say like someone is booking a ticket for a monument, and these two properties are like static, where they have to like give like the name of the person and the group size every time. And then we have like this Boolean field called is hiring guide. If this field is true, then the guide ID and like the guide fees should exist. If this value is not true, then we like don't care about these two fields. So let's see how we can define this in Vine. So app validators monument.ts. So let's import Vine, and here we will say Vine.object name Vine.string. group size, Vine dot number should be a positive value, and let's export it. Export constant book monument visit validator, or maybe we can get rid of book. We can say monument visit validator. So these two are like static properties which always exist. And next we have like conditional properties where we are saying if this value is true, then these two fields should be there. And if this value is not true, then guide ID and fees is not required. And for that, we can create a thing called an object group. So first let me create it and then we can talk about it. So here we will say hiring guide schema, and we can say Vine group. And we will say helpers is true, data dot is hiring guide. Then we want is hiring guide Vine dot literal. We need the guide ID, that should be a number. And we need the guide fees, that should be a number 2. And next we will say otherwise. Let's copy this and paste it here, and let's say false. So what exactly we are doing is we are creating a group, and this group is like a union, and inside this group we can have multiple statements. So you can have like multiple if statements, and finally like an else statement as well. And each statement has a condition where you like check for some condition at runtime. You have like this function, and then you say if that condition is true, you can use this schema. And finally, like once you have defined this group, you can merge it inside a object. So I will say merge, and let's create an endpoint for it first. So we'll say monument ID visit. This should be singular. All right, and if you like hover over it, you can see this is how like our TypeScript type looks like. It has, you know, like these two static properties. Then we are merging a union of two objects where it says either it's going to be like this first object where is hiring guide is true, and then we have guide ID and guide fees, or it's going to be is hiring guide false. So it's going to be like one of the two conditions. And also inside code, if I say if this thing is true, rest of the properties will like show up automatically. So as you can see, I can access the guide ID, and it says it's a number. And if I say it's false, then I'm not able to access the guide ID, because at runtime, if this value is false, guide ID will like never exist. This is where, you know, like unions are a little better than the thing we have in Laravel, which is like sometimes. Union also provide you that type safety alongside the runtime validation. We have some questions. How to deal with the default values? Sure, I will cover that after this. Can you type an object as record type, say the keys are unknown? Sure, we will go through that as well. Why the name Vine? It's random. There's like no specific reason behind that. Can I have a field as number or string? Yep, you can. Again, we will go through that as well. So we have like 3 more examples to cover. So let's give this one a run. So very first, like the validation fails for only these 3 fields. So let me say name, group size, 20 people. Are we hiring the guide? I say true. And as soon as I set it to true, I have to like define other 2 fields. If I set it to false, everything works fine. We don't have to like define those 2 fields. So let me say true, guide ID 1, how much they're gonna take, again, $19.99, and we are all good. So this is how like basically union works at the object level. So if you have an object with some static properties and then you have some dynamic properties, you express those dynamic properties as groups. And then again, like each group can have multiple conditions, and every time a condition is going to be true, you will have a schema associated with it. Now, coming to the default value, let's go to the documentation and let's talk about it. So the question is, can you have a method where you can say default and then like define the default value if the original value is missing? We don't have that. Instead, we have this parse method, which will run every time Vine.js is about to validate the field. But this is like going to be the very first function that runs in the entire pipeline. And the reason we don't have a default method, because you might end up like we might end up creating so many variants of it. Like for example, you might say, I want to assign a default value when the field is missing, or I want to assign a default value only when the field is null, or I want to assign a default value when the field is missing and something else is like true or false. For example, you're validating a form which has a field called is super user, and then you have a field called role. You want to assign a default role only when is super user is false. So like you want to express that rich behavior. Now we might like end up with so many different variations of default method. Instead, we give you a single method like called parse. It takes a callback, and inside this callback, you can pretty much like do anything you want. So you can check if the value is missing, it's null. If some other value has some other, like some other field has some other value, then return something. So there's like this one single method called parse, which can work as a substitute for the default value. Another question, can you type an object as record type, say the keys are unknown, but the object is? Yep, we do have it, and we call it record. So here in this example, what we are saying is we want to validate colors, but we don't know the name of the colors the user will set, but the value should be a hex code. You define it as a record, then you say every value should be a hex code. Now the user is free to define any, like name for the object keys. It can be white, black, lime, yellow, purple, whatever they want. Also, if you want to, like validate the keys to be in like some certain pattern and only like certain keys to be allowed, you can define this method called validate keys, which will get an array of all the keys for this object, and then you can check if they like pass some certain validation. If not, you can report an error for that. So you can do that as well. Let's can I have a field like number or string? Yep, you can. And we have, so this one, you know what, we can try to create it. So I will create it within the request. So register or like health checks. Let's say like someone is trying to register an endpoint for the health checks, just taking the example we have out here. And what we want is, let's import Vine.object. Let's copy this. So what we want this health check field either to be a Boolean, so someone can say true or false, whether they have like enabled or disabled the health check, or they can provide a custom URL from which we can like basically get the health check information of the application. So for that, you can create a union using the method called union of types. And here we will say either it can be a Boolean or it has to be a string. That string should be like formatted as a URL. So what we are saying is we want to create a union of different types. Now here types are really important. All these types should be distinct. So the first type is a Boolean, the second type is a string. Now if I say string.email, this will not work because these two are like duplicate types. Yes, like the like in the first one, the value is formatted as a URL. In the other one, the value is formatted as an email, but they both are string data types. So this schema will not compile. Now, union of types is like also a shorthand so that you don't have to define the union conditionals by hand. So if you have like some really complex conditions, you can always create a union and express those conditions manually. But if you have like simple, like if you're like dealing with distinct data types, then you can use union of types. So let's say validator vine.compile. Yep, it doesn't make sense to compile it within the request, but I'm just doing it for the sake of simplicity. Validator.validate request all. So if we copy this, let's make a new request to this endpoint. It says invalid value provided for health check. If you want, you can also define a custom error message. So what we can say is, here we can say otherwise. Field. That's the second argument, and we can say health check should be a string or a Boolean. And here we say union of types. So this way you can like basically report a custom error in case all of the union check fails. So here we have like our custom error message. So if we send some data, health check, and I say true, it will work fine. I say false. Oh, that fails, which is weird. I know that works fine. Okay, maybe I did something. And if I define a value, then it like recognizes it that the value is a string, but it's not like a URL. So it throws the URL validation and not like the validation in the otherwise clause. So here we can say https google.com and everything works fine. So this is how you can like have unions where like you want something to be a number or a string, a Boolean or a string, those type of values. Another question. Do you have access to other fields inside the parse callback? Yep, you do. So let's go to this one. This is a simple one, right? So here we say parse. And you will have value and you should have field as well. Let's see. Nope. 1 second. Nope, you don't have access to other values, but I think it should be a really simple one. We should let you do that. So right now you cannot, but I think I will have to like just add support for that. We have access for that in transform. Yeah, I think I missed it from parse, so we can add it. It should be a very simple one. Can you validate a date object? Not right now. I have to add a specific data type for dates. Hello, people. Hello. So, yeah, that's how it looks like. And what else can we cover? We can also cover the transforming of data types. So, let's say this one. Yeah, price, right? So let's say once you have the price, you want to convert it to some specific money data type, or let's say amount data type. So you have access to the value over here. And let's say we have got something here called money, which takes value and cents as a number. And then it, exposes some other methods like format, so that you can format the money as per some currency and do the money formatting and all that stuff. Let's make it public so that we don't get any error. And from here, you can say new money value. So what we are basically doing is, once the value has been validated, we are transforming its type to anything like we really want. And if we come to our routes and out here, you can see the price data type is money. It's not like it's no longer a number. It's a money data type. So you can do that as well. All right. What else can we cover? Do we have any questions from anyone? Okay, seems like we are all good. So we can cover one more topic, and that is how you can create custom schema types in Vine. So we have this guide where we actually go through an entire example of creating a money data type. And for that, we are going to use Dinero.js. Dinero is like a JavaScript library, which makes it really simple to work with data that is related to money or currencies and all that stuff. So if we go to that website, yeah, this is the one, like version v2. And let's go to getting started, quick start. What we can try to do is we can try to create a custom schema type right now. So let's see how should we start. Okay, so if you talk about what exactly a schema type is, a schema type is basically a class, and then within that class you have a pipeline of validations that you want to run in order to make sure that after the validation you get a specific data type out of it. In our case, we want to create a class which represents money in our application. But before we create the class for that particular type, we also want to create a validation rule that makes sure that the value is valid at runtime. So just to summarize, every time you create a custom schema type, you always have to start with a validation rule, which I would say enforce that data type at a runtime, if that makes sense. So in our case, what we will do is we will copy everything from here. We will go to this file. Let's get rid of all this and paste it here. We need to install Dinero. How do we do that? Like this. And we also need to install their currencies package. So let's install that as well. Everything looks good. So Like out here on the top, we have a bunch of imports. This is how like you create a validation rule in Vine. So let's say if you want to create a validation rule that work with strings, you can create it by saying vine.createRule and give it like the implementation callback out here. So in this case, we want to create a validation rule where we get the value as a number and then we convert it to a Node.js amount object, or we can say like the money object. So what we are doing out here is very first we get the input field value and we convert it to a number data type. If you if you remember, everything that comes over an HTTP request, especially like if it's a serialized HTML form, it's going to be a string. So in Vine.js, we have like some of these helpers which can convert those strings to a specific JavaScript data type for you. So on this line, we are saying convert that value to a number data type. If after the conversion that value is a nan, which basically means the input was not a valid number, then we want to report an error. The field value must be a number, and we are saying the error ID should be money so that people can like define custom validation errors for this error code. And then we give it the field. And once our runtime validation passes, we take that numeric value, we convert it to a Dinero amount object, and finally we call this method called field.mutate, which basically rewrites the field's value for the output and also for like rest of the validations that will come after this validation. I hope that was clear. So this is how like you define validation rule basically. Now as a next step, what we have to do is we have to define a custom schema type class, and it's a class because that's how like Vine.js allows you to define custom schema types. So I'm going to copy everything from here and let's paste it out here to the bottom. We need to update our inputs and also import base literal type. We need field options as well and this validation type as well. All right, we are all good. So here we are like defining what the output of this schema type will look like. Like in case of vine.string, the output is a string. In case of vine.number, the output is a number. In our Vine money schema type, the output will be like this Dinero type, and the actual value is going to be a number. So we define our custom data type, which extends this base literal type class, and we define the output type over here as a generic. Now here, we have a constructor which take the field option, would take like the initial set of validation. This is something like every schema type does. Then it calls super, which is like basically calling the constructor on the base literal type, giving it the options, giving it the validations. If there are no validations, then we will use our isMoney validation rule by default, which means as soon as you will create a new instance of this of this class, a new validation rule will be like pushed into the validation pipeline, and that validation rule is something we have like created out here on the top. Next, we have to implement this clone method, which basically like clones an instance of this class, so that you can like create a base type, then clone it, and then like further modify it and use it somewhere else. And cloning is like really simple. We create a new instance of the class. We call the method clone options. This method is defined on the base literal type class. And then we say clone validations, which is again defined on this base literal type class. That's pretty much all we have to do. Now we can go to our sum validator. Where is our product validator? Yeah, out here. Let's remove this. And here we can say the price is new Vine money. So what we're saying is the price should be of this specific type, where we are like creating a new instance of this Vine money class. I will also show you how you can add a method to this Vine object, but for now, let's give this a run. So if we go to Insomnia, create a product, let's remove this, see what happens. Okay, so here it says the price field must be defined. If we define some gibberish, it says it should be a number, all good. And it says the amount is invalid. Wow. And I think why is that? It should be in cents. So either like you can send the amount in cents, or maybe you can like convert it inside this type. So when we are giving it to this, we can say in 200. That should do the trick, I think. What happened? Okay, cool. I think we are all done. So out here, if we look at this price output, this is like more than a value. It has amount, it has currency, it has scale. This is like basically how Dinero.js represents amount internally. And if we go to our route, and here you can see the type is money. It shouldn't be money. It should be this thing. It says money, I think. Yeah, that's right, because like we have defined our type as money here. Let's like update it to Dinero money, just, or you know, like what? It can be Dinero amount. And we give it here. We come back to our route. Yeah, it says Dinero amount. Yeah, that's fine. So the type is here as well. We can access like any property that we want to. Output dot price dot to JSON create like every basic stuff that you have on Dinero. This is how like you can create custom data types in Vine. What else do we have? Now let's see how we can like basically extend the schema builder of Vine.js and add a custom type to it. So what we are going to do is we will like write this code. So copy it and paste it here. We need to import this class. Yep. And so what we are saying is like this Vine class, we are saying we are adding a macro. If you have ever used AdonisJS, you might be aware of like what macros are. If you're not, this is like basically a shorthand to add a method to the prototype of a class. So we are saying we want to define a Vine method, and every time anyone calls this method, we want to create a new instance of it. Since we are adding this method at runtime, we have to tell TypeScript about it as well. So here we are saying TypeScript, hey, this class called Vine has a new method called money, and its output is this Vine money class. Now we can go to our product, and here we can say Vine.money. We can get rid of this class. It should work. I have no idea why my server is crashing. Vine.money is not a function. Why is that? Okay, I think why is that? It's because we have to import that file, start. Yeah. It's all good. Yep, everything works fine now as well. And now we have like a custom data type we can use anywhere we want. If you want, you can like wrap it inside a package and let anyone else use it. So yeah, that's how, like custom schema types works in Vine. Cool. Out of the topic question, what is the expected release date of V6? Even I don't know. I have to work on it. I don't have any like even rough timelines of that. Cool. So yeah, that's like pretty much I wanted to show in terms of Vine, like why I created it, why it exists, some of the stuff that you can do with it, like creating custom schema types, creating custom rules. With custom rules, we have like a cool thing. We have like these factories that you can use to validate your rules. So if you like, let's say want to validate this money rule, you can pull in this factory called validator, and here you can say validator. Okay, seems like the export is broken, but so something that needs to be like fixed post this stream. The basic idea is you have this validator, then you have your rules, and you can tell this validator to like execute a rule asynchronously or like normally. So here you like pass the rule, here you give it the value, and using this output, you can write your assertion. So you can say, I assert that my validation should have succeeded, or my validation should have failed. My validation should have failed with like one error, or like with this specific error. So like these factories allow you to have a bit of convenience when you're testing your validation rules. And the good part is, let's say if your validation rule relies on another validation rule to be executed before it. In that case, you can give this factory an array of rules. So you can say, okay, my unique rule relies on the email one. So you give the factory an array of email and the unique rule, and it will like run both of them for you, one after the other. Can I do stuff like string.back address, adding custom stuff to string number? Yep, you can do that. You have to like create custom rules for that. So like in this guide itself, so like we have this example where we are like creating a unique rule, but you can create a rule for MAC address. And the simplest way to use that is like you call this method to use and you give it your rule. If you want, you can like add a macro to Vine string class, and then you can use it like this. So you can like extend the existing schema types as well. So you can extend Vine string, Boolean number, everything like that's shipped with Vine. So yeah, I think that's pretty much all I wanted to cover. If anyone have any questions, I'm more than happy to talk about them. Cool. So if we don't have any questions, maybe we can go ahead and wrap up. Cool then. I think everyone's good. So yeah, if you want to use Vine, you can go ahead and use it. If you want to use it inside your AdonisJS V5 projects, you can do that as well. It will like in fact make your migration to V6 a lot simpler. Like you don't have to like migrate your validation schemas to Vine afterwards. You can do that if you want to use it with any other framework. You can do that. You can use it with Fastify, Nest. I also tried it with Nitro from the Nux team. It worked well. You can use it with Remix, whatever you like. If you find any bugs, do let us know about that, and we'll get them fixed. Cool. Then we will wrap up. Thanks everyone for showing up and interacting and giving Vine.js a look. Thank you so much.